So Eddie Jones only gone and done it. He has resigned as the Wallabies coach, not even 10 months into his 5-year contract and just after the World Cup. Now, we heard rumours this might be coming, but it's still a very strange decision indeed. In fact, I wasn't even going to do a video today, have a day off from all those videos from the World Cup, but I checked my phone later in the evening and yes, he has resigned. I was doing some decorating, paint all over my hands, but got to talk about this because Eddie Jones is such a huge figure. I'd started writing a piece for a video about Eddie Jones's World Cup and his strengths and weaknesses and all of that sort of thing, and now he's resigned. It's so strange because from what we heard from Rugby Australia, he was brought in to really shake things up, change the Wallabies, start again. And even though he made, I think, some pretty bad decisions in many ways for this World Cup, if you're looking at a 5-year tenure, maybe he could have pulled things around. Some of those players that didn't perform could have started performing. They maybe benefit from the defeat, if you like, the disappointment from this World Cup and be stronger from it. And they had injuries in their latter stages there. Skelton was injured, Tupu was injured. So I think you'd say, yes, it was a disaster, but if his remit is to rebuild the Wallabies, then I think you have to let him have this and let him carry on. So what's happened, I don't know. There's a review going from Rugby Australia. Maybe Eddie Jones got wind of what was going to happen and he's kind of jumped before he was pushed, if you like. I mean, he said he's very committed to Australia, and he's Australian, of course, to the core, so it seemed weird that he would walk away if he wasn't going to get fired. Why Rugby Australia would fire him, I think it's a weird decision because, what were you expecting? I mean, I did a whole background bit on Eddie Jones. I'm only going to touch on it now because he's actually gone from the job. But Eddie Jones brings in a culture of uncomfortableness, if you like. Fear, maybe, but it keeps people on their toes. Like you say, you don't bring him in to make friends. He definitely didn't make friends. Quade Cooper obviously got chucked out of the squad, and if you needed a player for this World Cup, Quade Cooper was definitely the man, so it was a bad decision we all knew for this World Cup, but in the long term, maybe it's the way to go. Noah Lolesio, I thought was the terrible decision because he's a guy you still want in Australia, and he kind of ran away after that. But anyway, we know that Carter Gordon Donaldson didn't perform, but if it's a long-term vision, then okay, maybe let him off. And yes, he pushed Nick White out a little bit. McDermott was the young guy coming in. It didn't work, but he's an autocrat. His decision goes, and he does make some strange decisions, but he definitely makes very bold decisions. The problem, of course, is with the autocratic approach is if it's all on you, it's either all right or all wrong if you don't listen to people around you. I remember that interview I did with England's attack coach, Gleeson, and he was saying, yeah, Eddie Jones pretty much picks my sides for me. I have some input, but it's not really my side. So that's what you get. Rugby Australia knew that, so kind of what were they expecting? Were they expecting really safe selections? I don't know. So Eddie Jones, he has strengths, he has weaknesses. In the short term, he will shake things up. He did shake things up. We didn't think it was going to work in this World Cup, and it didn't, but why would you chuck him out? I mean, I'd written a whole piece saying, in the long term, Eddie Jones often doesn't work because, he's so work focused. He can work people to the bone, the coaches, the famous story of John Mitchell on a day off for England said, I want to go and watch my son play professional cricket on his day off. And Eddie Jones said, no, you can't go because we've got work to do. And John Mitchell was like, well, it's my day off. I'm going to go and watch my son. And after that, John Mitchell got sacked. And there's plenty of stories from Andy Good from Rugby Pass of the pretty bad way that Eddie Jones treats people because he's in pursuit of excellence, and if no one works as hard as him, maybe he doesn't quite understand it, but in the short term, yeah, it tends to work a little bit. So again, surprised that he hasn't been given more time. That thing about his interview or his phone call with Japan was pretty odd as well. We'll see if he actually does end up going to Japan in some way, shape or form as a coach or a consultant, but it definitely didn't help. I mean, he has done consulting when he was part of England as well. It's kind of something he does. He does, multitask on different jobs. But anyway, there's pros and cons of Eddie Jones. My point is, what were Rugby Australia expecting? And if they were going to fire him, I mean, why? I mean, you could bring in this guy in to shake things up. He shook things up. It didn't go well at all, but then you let him at least try and restructure the team. So let's have a little retrospective on Australia's World Cup. Now, we know they're not quite the force they used to be. They struggle to get the top athletes because there's so many sports competing in Australia for a small talent pool, like basketball, soccer, they're growing, rugby league obviously, Australian rules football. So we know it's tough, but they still had plenty of good talent in their team, and we know that Fiji are a better outfit than they were, especially with Fijian Drua now as the base of their team. It's not just foreign stars or foreign-based stars. Wales, they put together one of their cleanest World Cups, really good tactical display against Australia, so it's not like they were playing against poor opposition. Sure, they didn't play very well, but they were up against some decent teams. So I wonder if there was a player revolt already. I mean, he dropped Michael Hooper, even though Hooper would have been great for this World Cup, but if you're looking to the future, maybe. Then Slipper was dropped as captain. We had that weird thing where it was Hooper and Slipper as co-captain, and in the end it was none of them. Skelton was the captain, and then the even stranger decision just to go for Carter Gordon as your main fly half, with utility fly half fullback Ben Donaldson backing him up. Neither had any experience, and they were pretty disastrous, especially Carter Gordon, to be honest. So yeah, in the short term, yeah, it was terrible. It did seem that one thing Australia had going for them was some amazing outside backs. 12 Karevi, 13 Pattaya in the centres, looked class, but then when they had their chance to salvage some pride, he drops them both for Feketi 12 and Parisi 13, who haven't even played there, and they were terrible. Is that really what the Australian attack coach wanted? I mean, Eddie Jones had named a bizarre utility player selection of Josh Kemeny and Dylan Pesh, and it was news to them that they were utility players and they weren't even used there. And from the last 2 years for England, Eddie Jones made some pretty terrible decisions on selections, which everyone said, that seems pretty weird. Why has he selected them? But, we were kind of stuck around with, well, if Eddie Jones says it, then it must be a good idea. But I think we have to say now, is Eddie Jones actually a very good selector? But in spite of some of the strange selection decisions, Australia did have a good backline, outside of Carter Gordon, that is. 12 Karevi, 13 Pattaya, 11 Corambetti, 14 Nwanga Tuazi, 15 Kellaway. That's pretty good. In fact, I'd say that's very good. But then tactically on the pitch, they didn't use them very well. Australia seemed pretty naive, to be honest. I mean, the game against Wales was the epitome of this. The Wallabies got loads of ball and they ran and ran and ran at the Welsh defence, which was excellent. But then we've seen multiple times in this World Cup, you need more than just a running attack. You need a kicking game. You need a tight game as well. For example, Scotland's attack versus South Africa and New Zealand's against France. You can't just throw the ball around. And the Welsh just stayed connected in defence, popped the ball deep in behind the Wallabies with the kick, and then the Wallabies repeated the process again and again. And of course, when things weren't working, this is when Australia needed those old heads, Michael Hooper, Nick White, Quade Cooper, to kind of right things, but they didn't have them, and they really crumbled under the lack of leadership and experience. Now, the previous coach, Dave Rennie, his record wasn't the best, but his performances on the pitch I thought were pretty good. He was getting, quite a lot out of Australia, to be honest. And yes, they play in the Rugby Championship every year. That's against New Zealand and South Africa in particular, so it's tough to get wins. When Eddie Jones became available from England, dig Rugby Australia, get too excited and throw the baby out with the bathwater. It kind of seems so at the moment, especially since he's walked. So, what of the future now he's gone? They've got to find another coach. Do they start again? I don't know. Do they go back to the old guys? Do they want to come back anyway after being treated how they were with Jones? Does Jones go to Japan? It's a complete mess. And as always, please put your comments below about this topic. It's very interesting. Why has he walked? Has he been pushed? Should he have walked? Should Rugby Australia have tried to stick with him? Should they have signed him in the first place? Anyway, all those comments below, and I'll catch you next time.